The guys on the Cover 3 podcast think that 6 wins for Sonny Dykes next year is enough to keep him off the hot seat. I disagree, and I'll tell you why next here on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. The show is brought to you today by Game Time. Game Time, if you need tickets to March Madness or your next TCU sporting event, check out the Game Time app today. Download to get $20 off the promo code. I'll tell you more about that later on in the show. I'll also talk about Mark Campbell getting an extension. He will be the TCU women's basketball coach through the year of 2030, at least according to his contract. Mike Buddy making his first major move as athletic director here at TCU. But we start today by discussing Sonny Dykes and his job status and where he's at. So if you remember, back in the fall, a lot of you were upset about midway through the year. I was one of those people that was upset. And following the SMU game, a number of you asked me, hey, is it time to start talking about Sonny being on the hot seat? And at that time, my answer was no. After the Houston loss, I changed my tune and I said, look, I feel like the way things are trending, if it continues to go this way at the end of the year, you have to make a move. But we all know what happened. TCU turned things around. And aside from a really close competitive loss to Baylor in the back half of the season, they were outstanding. They made a bowl game. They won their bowl game handily. They are now coming into this year with a lot of momentum. Now, not necessarily a lot of hype, because they didn't beat anyone that made national waves last year. But on a local level, I think people that follow the team can sense and can tell that this is a year that they've been building towards for the past couple of seasons. So the Cover 3 podcast, which is part of CBS Sports, they had a discussion about ACC and Big 12 coaches. They essentially went down the list and say, hey, here's the over-under win total for this particular team. If this coach doesn't reach that win total, is he still safe? So for TCU, they talked about Sonny Dykes. The over-under right now is 6.5 for TCU football. Is that enough to save Sonny's job? If he goes 6-6, will he be able to keep his job for another season? So I'm going to play the audio here. This is Chip Patterson setting up the question, and then Danny Cannell and Bud Elliott both chime in, but you'll primarily hear from Danny Cannell with the answer. But this is, again, part of the Cover 3 podcast on CBS Sports, talking about Sonny Dykes and his future.
Over under win total set at 6.5. Sonny Dykes certainly staved off any hot seat talk with the way that TCU turned their season around last year, but is 6.5 acceptable for TCU moving forward?
For another year. Yeah, I've got to be right. Like, I think it's one of those. I mean, you still have the national championship season, but I think where it gets uncomfortable is the fact what Rhett Lashley's doing at SMU, what Texas is doing, making repeated runs to the Final Four. I don't think that helps his situation at all, but I think it adds a little bit of complexity to it. But I think at 6-6, I think he's fine. But I think he would enter the following season on the hot seat.
So that's Danny Cannell talking about Sonny Dykes and his future if he went 6-6 next season. And all of them sort of shared that same sentiment. It was basically like, he's done enough. He has enough capital in the job that he could survive it. Now, Tom Fornelli brought up an interesting point, and he said, we don't really know how TCU would handle a situation like that, because Gary Patterson had the job for such a long time. It's been 2 decades since they were in a scenario where you really had to make a decision on a relatively new coach, because they moved on from Gary Patterson, but that was a very different situation. I would disagree with him. I think if he goes 6-6, TCU's making a change at the end of the year. Now, I say that realizing, before everybody chimes in, I know there's a lot of extenuating circumstances that could happen. I understand that if they went 6-6, but Josh Hoover was hurt for the majority of the season, then they probably don't make a move, because if they end up making a bowl game and going 500 with Ken Seals or Adam Schobel or a combination of those two guys, then they probably assess it and say, you know what? Tough luck. Didn't have our best player, didn't have our quarterback. Let's run it back and see what he does next year. The schedule is also tough. You open the season with North Carolina, which is a much tougher game now because of the Bill Belichick factor. You play SMU in non-conference play. You play Colorado in Big 12 play. You play Iowa State. You play Kansas State on the road. BYU on the road. We can go down the list here. There's a world where this team underachieves, even if they're in full health. But what I keep coming back to in my mind, I understand the schedule's tougher. I understand that things could happen where this team isn't at full strength. But they've been building towards this season for a couple of years now. A lot of what we sort of slogged through in the past 2 seasons has been with the understanding that, well, Sonny came into a tough situation. Year 1 wasn't really indicative of what this roster was when he took over, because they had a lot of COVID seniors that had extra eligibility and were at the peak of their development cycle. But once a lot of those guys left, it was sort of a total reset. And so year 1 was the Chandler Morris year, and they didn't live up to expectations. Offensive line struggled. The defense was a mess. You make a move at defensive coordinator. You bring in Andy Avalos. You saw some improvements last season. But if you end up with a 500 football team or worse, that means things didn't go as planned. You didn't meet your expectations. And that's with a returning quarterback who will basically be on year 3. A defense that is in year 2 of their system. And if you didn't meet expectations, there would be some sort of change that is necessary. So if it's not Sonny, what would the change be? You've already scrapped defensive coordinators once. You seem pretty committed to your offensive coordinator at the moment. Kendall's brought in a lot of guys that have been with him before, have been on staff with him before. It seems like he has pretty much free reign with what he wants to do philosophically with this offense. So what would the move be if not the head coach? Your typical sort of scapegoat, or like, okay, we don't want to make a big time move, but if you're agreeable to shake up the coaching staff, then we'll give you another chance here. And Chip Patterson went on to mention TCU seems like a school that if it came down to it, could pass the hat around and make it happen if they really wanted to make it a move. Because I know a lot of you will also say, well, he got an extension after year 1, so there's no way they're going to go through with the buyout. And I've said this before. My philosophy is on buyouts. It's easy for me to say it because it's not my money. If TCU wants to make this move, they're not calling me. Mike Buddy's not leaving me a voicemail or sending me an email saying, hey, we need to get this done. We need you to jump in and donate, right? But buyouts are always too expensive until they aren't. Everybody sort of uses that reasoning as, oh, well, yeah, they're not going to make a move because of that. But then when push comes to shove, if it has to be done, it has to be done. So if they end up 6-6, yeah, it probably depends on who they lose to. If they're 6-6 with losses to SMU and Baylor, then I think we're talking about a really bleak situation. if they're 6-6, but maybe they win a couple of those rivalry games or one of those rivalry games, possibly is it different? But one thing that is intriguing about the new Big 12, how are teams going to evaluate success? Because there were a lot of you that didn't think last year was successful. I would say at the end of the day it was. You won 9 games. But there are a number of fans that thought 9 wins was sort of cheapened because of the easier schedule in the back half of the year, and it didn't mean what it would have if you were in the typical round robin Big 12 schedule that TCU had been playing in the past. So for all the Big 12 schools, they're going to have to answer that individually. Like, what does success look like? Is 7 or 8 wins on a regular basis, on a consistent basis, still acceptable, or is that something that they want to move on from? And only those schools can answer those questions, but it'll be intriguing to see where they land on some of those. When we come back, a coach that has a very secure future at TCU, Mark Campbell, will talk about his contract extension next year in Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. It can be tough to keep up with where all your money is going, all those recurring payments, those hidden charges. It's just difficult. You spend more than you want to. And if you've ever checked your bank account and you say, what the heck happened? Where did all my money go? You should try Monarch Money today and make it your personal CFO. It gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So stop managing your money and start building wealth. They have all-in-one convenience. You can get to all your accounts from one place instead of juggling different apps. Easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. Give Monarch Money a try today. Also want to talk to you about our friends at Game Time. Happy that they are back with us. Game Time, it's the best way to get tickets on the secondary market. Download the app today. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Game day picks. Curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have easy ticket shopping. There's amazing deals right now on the Game Time app. Lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And they give you seat views, pictures of what your seat view is going to be before you buy. There's no surprise fees. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app and give it a try today. Well, Mike Buddy has made his first major move as TCU athletic director, and his first major move was extending Mark Campbell's contract through the 2030 season. Steven Johnson from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram tweeted this out this afternoon. He said TCU and Mark Campbell have agreed to a contract extension that extends Campbell's current deal through 2030. Shortly after, TCU announced it as well. I told you on Wednesday's show that Mike Buddy had sent out a message on social media saying, hey, it's going to be a great week for Frog fans. Good news starts tomorrow. And I sort of had a hunch that this was what he was talking about because he had spoken with the media earlier in the week, and he told them without really being prompted, like, hey, we're working on a contract extension with Mark Campbell. That's been my top priority since I got here in January. And that's not the type of thing that you just throw out in the world on the record unless you're close to the finish line. And they very much were, because a couple of days later, it gets announced that he's going to be here through 2030. I cannot tell you what Mark Campbell's, well, I know what some of his aspirations are. I know he wants to win a national title. I know he wants to be, one of the top coaches in women's basketball. I'm not sure what a dream job would be for him. I know he spent a good amount of time at Oregon. That's where he had the most success. So I think if they ever came calling, that would be a tough call to at least not pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm listening. There's your blue blood jobs in women's college basketball. But I've mentioned this a couple of times over the past few days. one cool thing about women's basketball, there does seem to be a history or a tendency for these coaches, if they find a good place and they have the resources they need, to stay there and to not shop around that much. And there's also jobs that just don't come up very often. Like maybe Gino Auriemma retires soon, but the UConn job has been his forever. Don Staley has no intention of leaving South Carolina. You go down the list, right? This was an outstanding hire by Jeremiah Donati. I mean, I did not know who Mark Campbell was when he came over from Sacramento State. I remember people that were in the women's basketball world and that followed the sport closely had good things to say about him. You looked at his resume and it was impressive, but I had no idea how good he was as a recruiter. I mean, from the moment he got here, he was getting players left and right. And there have been legit stars like Sedona Prince and Haley Van Lith. Madison Connor was averaging like 4 points a game at Arizona. I mean, she was known as a shooter. I remember when she committed, people were like, oh yeah, she's a good outside shooter. That's her thing. But she was not known as a scorer. She was not somebody that's going to put up double-digit points in a ball game. TCU gave her the confidence to do that. So he's had a good mix of like finding star players, finding some role players. And now he has the chance to go and build this program in the way that he wants to, long term. He talked after the Baylor game when they won the Big 12 regular season title. He was just sort of reflecting on everything that had happened and the people that got him there and the people that brought him to TCU and helped the program, start out so quickly in 2 years. And he said that first group that committed in the transfer portal before his first year started, they did that on faith because at the time TCU didn't really have an NIL budget for women's basketball. So they couldn't offer much besides, hey, you're going to get playing time because there's nobody else here standing in your way of seeing the court. So you'll get significant minutes. But that was what he sold them on. He also sold them on the vision of, hey, I think I can build something here. I'd love for you to be a part of it. And then this past off season, I mean, getting Haley Van Lith in the transfer portal was just a huge deal. And I remember like it was done so quietly. There wasn't hardly any discussion about it. And then it was just like one day you woke up and some rumors started, and by lunchtime she had committed. And then Maddie Shear as well, who Maddie didn't even get to play this year because of a back injury, but she was a big name from Kentucky. Go get Donovan Hunter. And I believe what he's shown this year is it's not just his ability to recruit, but he puts together a great culture, and they found a way to sort of start implementing the X's and O's and get some advantages there as well. Because I'll tell you, I was thinking about this today. I did a radio hit with Matt Mosley, and we were talking about, just March Madness in general. I realized that team in year one was talented, but I went to that game when they played Baylor in Mark's first year, and they were completely outclassed. I mean, they led by a couple points at halftime, but in the second half, Baylor just ran away from them. And it was one of those moments of like, okay, new kind of startup team is excited. They've made some things happen. They think they're going to challenge the big dog, and then they end up getting beat. So the leap they made from year one to year two has been insane. You saw some flashes of it in year one, but it wasn't very consistent. And so the fact that they have been able to build on it, get better, and get to a place now where like they're the hunted. They're the top of this class right now in the Big 12. They are. They won both titles this year. And so now the issue is, can you sustain it? But I feel like Mark's done such a good job early on. He's at least given himself the opportunity to really build this thing in the right way and do it in his image, right? Like create the identity and the culture that he wants around this program for the foreseeable future. And that's a very beneficial thing for him and for the program itself. Congratulations. And I think good job of Mike Buddy by not letting this linger and just getting it done. When we come back, we'll get some of your thoughts on yesterday's episode. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Have you looked at those game times for tomorrow? It starts at 11 a.m. I believe the last game's at 9:30 Central Time. You're going to need a 5-hour energy tomorrow to get through your day, to get through March Madness. Daylight savings has snuck up on us. If you're still feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5-hour energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-hour energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up when you need it. I've been saying you're going to stay up late watching these tournament games, especially this weekend. You need a 5-hour energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Go to 5-hour energy. Grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. 5-hour energy. Give it a try today.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
So a couple days ago, I talked about Deion Sanders and his proposal, his idea to treat college football more like the NFL in the spring. And what he was going to do is he's currently looking for somebody to come scrimmage Colorado for their spring game. So instead of doing your inter squad, typical, white jerseys versus black jerseys, you bring in another squad, go head to head. And it's like a preseason game. And he also wanted to have some joint practices before that, like an NFL training camp atmosphere. And Fran Brown, at least on Twitter, responded and said, hey, Syracuse will come out there. Like, we'll come play you guys. We'll come spend some time in Boulder, which will be very cool to see. I think TCU should consider it if it becomes a trend. What we're seeing right now with spring games is everybody's getting away from it because they're worried about tampering. They're worried about the way the sport's moving, the way college football is going. They don't want to mess with it anymore. But this would totally revitalize the way that people treat spring games and the spring off season. And so I ask our audience because I can't, as long as I've been around, this has not been a thing. Colleges have just always had their typical spring game, inter-squad scrimmage type of deal. But I wanted to know from former players, like back in the day, was this something that happened? And I did get one response from Dylan Miller. He said, if I remember my dad correctly, who played at TCU in the early 80s, he said they would scrimmage or have joint practices with smaller colleges around. I'll ask him, though, to get my story straight. Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, there's a lot of things about college football in that era that no longer exist, like freshman teams, just the way that student athletes were treated or the way they're related to fans and media. And while it would be cool for TCU to scrimmage a Power 4 opponent, I mean, I mentioned on the show that day, I was like, what if it was just like North Texas or UTSA or Texas State or something like that? That would still be a good thing for TCU. Like, it would give them the opportunity to evaluate their team against different competition. And it also just gives you the chance to see, like, okay, how do our guys handle a live competitive environment? How do our freshmen, how do our players that haven't played much, that we're expecting to step into bigger roles this year, how do they deal with that? Because you can't simulate it in practice. You can try, but it's not the same as playing a game, the speed of the game, remembering what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to execute it. All of that can get jumbled up in the moment. And the people that can recognize it, stay with it, are the ones that are going to play on Saturdays. We'll be back tomorrow. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Thank you for joining the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel or find us on your favorite podcast platform.